it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Hello Bluebird's Cake Time and Leaf Play. And I'm going to be using some pattern paper. I wanted to make a fall card, but I actually haven't had a chance to pick up any fall pattern paper yet this year. So I pulled out the Full Bloom pad from Simple Stories. This one has a lot of tones in it that I think work well for fall. It has oranges and mustard yellows and sage greens and kind of dusty muted aquas, and I just thought that that would work well. So I pulled out a pattern that I want to use as my color inspiration, and I've stamped out my images on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn jet black ink. So I'll be coloring with my Copic markers, starting with my fox, and for him I'm using YR12, YR14, and YR18. This is my go-to combo for foxes. I also sometimes do a combo that has E19 in it if I want to go a little bit of a darker tone, but since that pattern paper is really vibrant and bright, I decided to stick with this combo. So I started by laying in that YR18 in the shadowed areas down the back of the body, any place where, you know, there would be a shadow cast, like on the edge of his tail. Since it is towards his body, there wouldn't be a lot of light hitting there. Forgot to add a little bit to the underside of his arm under that plate, so I went back and did that, and then I blended out with the YR14. Then I came in with the YR12 for the highlight, and I almost was going to add in a fourth shade there on the face just to make it a little bit lighter, but I ended up deciding to just fill that in with the YR12, but I did leave some white space on the belly, and also I gave him some little white socks on his feet, and of course the tip of his tail. Now I felt like he wasn't quite dark enough, so I did go back in with a second layer. I really wanted more contrast, especially in those shadowed areas, so adding that second layer really beefs up the saturation of your coloring. It also smooths out your blend, so if you're struggling with the blend, this one wasn't too bad, but sometimes it can be, just depending on what colors you're using and how wet or dry your markers are. I recently spent an entire day refilling all my markers, so they should all be nice and juicy now. So I wanted to switch up the orange for the accessory images. I didn't want to use the exact same combo as the fox, so I kept the YR18 for that fallish tone, but added in the YR04 and the YR07, so it's just subtly brighter, and use that for one of the pennant banners and one of the leaves. And then I'm using E000 and E00 to make the transition from the white, from the orange to the white, I should say, on the fox's body. Just adding a touch of that and letting it fade to white. I'm also going to use these shades to do an underlayer on my bunny. So I want to add some detail with him in a little bit, but first I just wanted to do some overall shading so I can kind of have a play with him and put the additional spots where I want them to go. So just like I did with the fox, just using the E00 for the darkest and then blend it out with the E triple and let that fade into the white. And then I'm going to use E30, E31, and E33 to give him those little dots and spots like I mentioned. I've said it before many times, and I'll probably continue to say it, but bunnies are one of my absolute favorite critters to color just because they come in so many varieties. I also love doing mice and dogs and cats because you can do all kinds of little different patches and details, and it just makes them look really fun and unique. So I'm using that E33 first to lay in some little dots, and I'm going to give one ear a complete brown look, and then the other one's going to get some little spots, and just kind of stippling those colors, then using the E33 and the E30, and then finally going back to that E000 to help that fade into the rest of the white. And then I'm moving on to my raccoon, which I wanted to be gray. I decided to go with the toner grays because they're not too warm and they're not too cool. So I really like them for critters. I find that it's a nice kind of balance between the two. So because I need to have a lot of depth on him, I'm going to use 4 shades here. T0, T1, T3, and T5, and I'll actually add in more when I get to the black parts. But I'm going to start with the T5 and lay in my shadows. I also just counted out the rings on his tail. I wanted the tip of his tail to be black, so I just started with the gray at the base of his body and then worked my way up every other stripe for that. Blending out the T5 with the T3, just always making sure to catch the edge of the previous color. You don't want to go over it completely because then you're going to get that color to disperse and it's kind of going to break up and you'll get like a spotty look. So I'm just doing the very edge of the previous shade, and again doing that with the T1, just going right over the edge of the T3 and pulling that shade into the next one so that you get a nice smooth transition. And then I use the T0 on the inner part of his ears and also on his belly. And then I'm going to add in the T7 for the black parts. And I'm going to start with that. I could have even gone with the T9, but because that area around his eyes is fairly small, I wanted to keep it just a little bit lighter. You guys know I don't like to go over the eyes too dark because they get lost and then they don't have a personality if you can't see their eyes. It just becomes like a blob. So use the darkest 3 shades for that. And then I wanted to give them all some rosy cheeks and color in the insides of their ears. I'm using R000, R11, and R20. Although the R20 didn't show up on the fox's cheeks very well, so I'm going to go back and fix that in a minute. I'm just starting with that R20, blending out with the R11, and finishing with the R triple on the bunny and the raccoon. For the fox, I'm going to need to darken that combo up a bit, so I'm going to pull in R22, and then I'll blend that back out with the R20 and the R11. Next, I want to pull in that dusty aqua tone. I decided to go with BG11, BG53, and BG57. It's just slightly darker than the combo in the pattern paper, but it also shows up in that pattern paper like in the center of the daisy looking flowers. Also the ones with the white center has like little dots of that darker blue right around the center before it goes into the petals. So using that BG57 first, blending out with the BG53, and then the BG11 is going to be the highlight, and I'm going to do that on one of the pennant banners and also on another leaf. I did the pom-pom on the raccoon's hat and the party hat of the fox as well. Then I'm going to try to pull in that kind of peachy pink in that pattern paper, using the R000 again, along with R01 and R02. I'll do another pennant banner. And this was another combo that required 2 layers just to kind of get it to the saturation level of the rest of the coloring that I've been doing. I'm also going to do the bunny's hat with this combo, starting with the R02, blending toward the left with the R01, and then the R triple. And I just put my shading based on where I know they're going on the card. So I know the bunny is going to end up on the right side of the card, so the shading went on the right hand side. And then I'm going to do another leaf with this combo as well. I thought it would be kind of fun to do some unusual combos on some of these fall leaves, so that's why I have the blue and the peachy pink tone, just something a little different. I'm also going to use these shades to do the ribbon on the birthday gift down at the bottom. Just a nice soft peachy pink down there. Just adding the shading where the ribbon is knotted or where it's kind of wrapped on the underside of the gift and then also on the inner part of the bows. And then I'm going to pull in some yellows, and it is a brighter yellow, but to keep with the fall tones, I'm going to mix in kind of a golden yellow shade in there. So I'm using Y13 and Y15 for the brightness, and then YR23 for that mustardy yellow tone. Did another pennant banner, another fall leaf, and then the pom-pom on the fox's party hat. Then I'm going to switch to some reds, but I didn't want to go with my typical reds, which are a little more cool tone. While the R29 in there is one of the typical reds I grab because it's a really beautiful, vibrant red. But I wanted the other shades to be more orange leaning, so that's why I pulled in R14 and R17. I'm going to use that for the last pennant banner and also the party hat for my raccoon. Then I'm going to do the kind of inner part of the cake. I wanted it to be kind of like a strawberry or a raspberry jelly in the center. Probably raspberries. Raspberries are in season. I actually have raspberry bushes outside right now, and every morning I go outside and pick a handful for my Greek yogurt that I eat in the morning. I love raspberries. I'm going to move on to the green tones, and I wanted something that was more sage green, so this is definitely more blue toned greens. I'm using YG11, YG41, and YG45. I did another leaf and the pom-pom on the bunny's party hat, and then I'm also going to do the box part of the birthday gift. So again, just thinking about light source, I'm doing a little bit of a shadow under the top of the box, the lid, on the top edge of the lid, and then also under the bows where it's kind of the largest part of those, and then just leaving a little highlight where the light would naturally bounce on the edges. I added a little extra of that YG45 into the party hat just to make it a little bit more vibrant. And then I'm doing the rim of the plates that they're eating their slices of cake on using just the darkest two, the YG45 first, and blending out with the YG41. Then I'm going to move on to the wood, the two stumps. I'm going to use my E50s for those. I think even though there's no brown in that pattern paper, these are very warm toned browns, so I think they go really well with those rich fall colors that I'm trying to capture. So I'm using E51, E53, E55, and E57, adding the E57 on the bottom edge, but then also just a few streaks throughout the wood to give it that depth and that texture. I'll blend out the E57 with the E55. So I'm trying to make sure that everything blends fairly nicely, but with the wood, that's the one time that I'm not too concerned if there's a little bit of modeling because I want that texture to be there. So blending out the E55 with the E53, that's going to be my lightest for the outer part of those stumps. And then I'll use a little E53 with the E51 for the cut edges. And then for the cake, I decided to keep the same browns, but I'm just going to darken up the combo by adding in E59. And it's going to be a chocolate cake with chocolate frosting. So I'm using that E59 and blending out with the E57. And then I'll have a touch of the E55 at the very front edge there where the light would be hitting. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to grab a black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and go over the eyes of my raccoon and my fox. This adds like a thin layer of glaze and also just makes them really black and shiny. And then I'll trim these images out with their matching dyes. For my background, I'm going to take some Distress Oxide inks and just watercolor a simple background on a sheet of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock. So the first shade I'm using is Speckled Egg. The speckled egg is a little too dull for the pattern paper to be a perfect match, and the salvage patina was a little bit too bright, so I decided to combine the two. So I'm going to just add a little bit of salvage patina here and there, just trying to kind of plop it down a bit so that they mix and meld and I get like different values of those colors on the different areas. Then I will clean off that acrylic block and just wipe that off with a baby wipe so that I can do the ground. And I'm going to use cracked pistachio because I think that goes well with the Copics that I use, the green tones. But again, it's just a little bit too blue tone. I wanted a little more depth, so I'm going to mix that up. Just using the cracked pistachio to go up into the blue area. I actually need more grass than sky on this particular card. Then I'm going to deepen that up with some mowed lawn down at the bottom, but then also mix a little bit throughout that cracked pistachio toward the top as well. I'll go up a little bit more and just kind of mix the area between the ground and the sky to make it a little more seamless, and then add more of that cracked pistachio down into the mowed lawn so that you definitely see those two tones of green. And then I'll set this panel aside to dry. In the meantime, I'm going to go back to my Full Bloom paper pad by Simple Stories and choose another print to use. I'm going to use this kind of linen print. And I'm going to die cut that with the Hello Bluebird Gallery Frame number 2. I'm going to take the inserts out of each one and swap them. So you end up with 2 frames, and you could actually make 2 cards at once doing this. I always forget about that until I get into this stage, so I definitely could have colored a few extra images and made 2 cards at once. It definitely would have been a smart thing to do. I just didn't think of it at the time, but I'm going to flip those over to the back side and line them up, and actually the back side is also super cute, but I decided to keep it with the brighter fall tones for today. So then I'm just going to take some regular Scotch tape, and it's too wide to use, so I'm going to tear it down the center so that I get thinner strips, and I'm going to tape those 2 pieces of the frame together. And that way I can pop this up with foam tape so that I get a little bit of dimension on my card, and the whole thing will just kind of be back together as one unit and not separating as I try to lay down that foam tape. And I just kind of like measure it out next to the die cut so that I know how much to kind of tear off of the roll. And then, like I said, just tape it easily into place. I'm going to do the same thing for both of these panels. Since I have the tape out now, I might as well do it now, and then I could just save the second frame for another project. So then I'm going to grab that background piece that has dried, and I'm going to test it out with both of these pieces. So there's the one with the floral print on the inner part, or the one with the floral on the outer part. They both would have looked great, but I decided to use the one with the floral on the outer part for today. I have lined the back with foam tape, just cut down some thin strips, and also put it on that horizontal bar that goes across the lower part of the inner section of that die cut. So I'm just going to smooth that down into place to make sure that it is adhered well. And then I'm going to start working on my sentiment. So I wanted a birthday sentiment. So I'm using the Party on the Farm stamp set, and I'm going to heat emboss that onto some Barn Red cardstock from Lawn Fawn. So I just prepped that with my Rabbit Hole Designs powder tool, and then I'm stamping it in Versamark ink. It's just a clear sticky ink that works great for embossing. It's going to grab right a hold of that powder. And I'm going to just pour that over the sentiment, make sure it's really well coated, tap off any excess, and then I'm going to heat up my heat gun off to the side for maybe 30 seconds to a minute. Then I like to bring it to the back of the cardstock first. This just helps eliminate some of the warping, and then I bring it to the front until that's all nice and melted. I let that dry for maybe another 30 seconds to a minute, and then I'm going to buff off any excess powder with a microfiber cloth. This one is from Pink and Maine. And then I'm also going to stamp on the inside of my card. My card base is made from apricot cardstock from Lawn Fawn. I'm stamping in fake tan ink. And I'm using a sentiment from the birthday script stamp set from Hello Bluebird. And then the bunny image is from the Cake Time stamp set that my main images came from. I'm also going to die cut some letters from the Jane Small Alpha die set from Hello Bluebird from some Lawn Fawn Peacock cardstock. And now I'm ready to start assembling everything. So I'm going to glue my background piece and that die cut frame to the front of my card base, just making sure that is nice and straight on there, equal sides on all the edges. And then I'll bring in my images. I've added some foam tape to the back of some of them, and then some I'll have to add as needed because they're going to kind of overlap each other. I'm going to put the longer stump on the right hand side, and then I have the shorter stump that's going to go on the left, just a little bit lower. So I've used some foam tape and then liquid glue where it's going to overlap the other one, so everything will be on the same level. Then I want to add this little pennant banner hanging to the base of the long stump. So I'm just going to add that so it looks like it's been tied to the edges. And then I'm going to start adding my critters. So the raccoon is going to go on the far right of that stump. And then to the left of him, I'm going to have the bunny. And in this little scene, I'm imagining that it is the bunny's birthday. I just love the expression on her face with her cute little squint. She just seems extra happy. So seems like her friends have surprised her with this lovely little forest party. I'll have the fox sitting on the other stump, and then I'm going to add the gift down toward the bottom of the right hand side of the top portion, just right below that stump. So again, partial foam tape and then the top with liquid glue. Then I have these two little leaves. I'm going to add those kind of tucked behind the gift. And then I'll add the blue leaf towards the base of the fox's stump. So again, just adding some foam tape there and then a little touch of liquid glue where it's going to overlap the stump. And then the rest of the leaves I'm going to hold off adding because I know some of them I want to put around the sentiment in the lower section of that die. So I'm going to start with the happy birthday sentiment strip. And I've added another piece of foam tape to the back of that. That's going to go toward the top of that section, just making sure that it's even on both the left and the right there. And then the letters I'm going to add beneath that. So it's going to say happy birthday to you. And I'm going to lay them out first because, as I've mentioned many times, this glue dries really fast. So I want to make sure that I have the placement of my letters how I want them before I start adhering them. So I'm just kind of making sure that the edge of the T lines up with the point of the sentiment banner above, and then the edge of the U lines up with the point on the right hand side. And then I can start adhering those down. So I'm just going to pick those up with my EK Success reverse tweezers. I find that it's a little bit easy to adhere these tiny little die cuts that way. And then I can add the liquid glue to the back of them and set them down into place without getting my fingers all sticky. So just working my way through the first part of the two, and then I'm going to work my way backwards from the U part of the sentiment. So I just have the Y left, just adding that liquid glue and then adhering that down and doing any adjustments, but you can see that glue is already completely dry. So I'm going to take one of the orange leaves and add that toward the lower part of the sentiment, and then another leaf, a green one, toward the top to balance that out. And then I have this final little pinkish leaf, and I'm going to put that up at the top of the scene as if the wind is kind of blowing that around. To finish off this card, I wanted to just add a few extra details, starting with some Stardust stickles, adding a bit of glitter to the pom-poms on the party hats, and also the pennant banners, the ribbon on the gift, and all of the leaves. My bottle got a little bit clogged up, so I just used the pin from my liquid glue to release that so it would be flowing again, and then just finished off those last few leaves. And then I also wanted to add just a tiny little detail to the party hat, so I'm going to grab a white Sakura jelly roll pen and just add some little white polka dots to all of those. So incidentally, I filmed this video on my dad's birthday. I'm doing the voiceover on the first day of fall, which is the day after, and then tomorrow is my birthday. So a fall-themed birthday card just seemed like the perfect thing to work on right now. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. There's a look at all of that glitter and another peek at the inside. If you did enjoy it, please go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, ring that notification bell so that you never miss a video. I post new ones every Monday and Friday. All of the products I used, I'm going to list them and link them in the description bar for you in case you want to pick up anything for yourself. And if you'd like to continue watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I so appreciate each and every one of you, and I'll catch you soon in another video. Bye-bye.